Welcome. I'm Quinton Skinner, Senior Editor of Minnesota Monthly Magazine, and we're gathered here tonight at Lynn Lake Brewery for Conversations on Tap, our new quarterly event series with panels and audience discussions. It's going to be very lively tonight. Our topic is the fight for equality, a snapshot of working women, their past, present, and future in Minnesota. So come on, let's get started. I welcome everyone tonight. Thank you so much for coming out. It's such a pleasure to see you. My name is Quinton Skinner. I'm the Senior Editor of Minnesota Monthly Magazine. And the occasion for this latest installment of our quarterly series of Conversations on Tap is our latest issue on women in the workplace, and specifically Minnesota women. This was our starting point. And we discovered very quickly that this was an enormous topic, very difficult to do justice to, but we decided to break it down into a snapshot of what life is like for working women in Minnesota. Much better than average, it turns out, in terms of statistics for workplace participation, percentage of women who are in the corporate boardroom and who are CEOs. And yet, that's a very relative thing, because while those numbers are good against other states, they're still far from a position of equality. So it's kind of a mixed message, really, with the story. Things are good in Minnesota, but overall there's really a long way to go. By one measure of women in corporate boardrooms, in the progress that's been made since the 80s until today, we have another century to go before we achieve equality. I imagine most of us here don't want to wait that long, so in part that's why we're writing the story, and that's why we're hoping to have conversations to at least move the issue forward from hopefully a position of more enlightenment from where we started. So I would like to have our panelists, who are, if we could just please thank them for coming. These are the first people we asked, and they said yes. So we were just really over the moon. So I'm gonna ask if you could go down the line one by one and introduce yourselves, and then we'll get to some general topics.
I'm relieved to hear that we're not the B team. Thanks. That's good. That's good. My name is Meghan Wilker, and I am the Chief Operating Officer at Clockwork. And I am a woman.
I'm Joann Bangs. I'm the Dean of the School of Business and Professional Studies at St. Catherine University, and I've been doing a study along with one of my co-authors on women in corporate boards in Minnesota companies for the last 8 years. Fun stuff.
I'm Sue Hawks. I'm the CEO of Yes. I own a consulting firm, but I founded WPO, which is the Women Presidents Organization here in Minnesota. So we have more members here than anywhere else in the world. More multi-million-dollar women-owned businesses. Yes, we do. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Lisa Carlson. I am a chef owner, co-owner of Chef Shack. And I'm Carrie Summer, the other half of Chef Shack in Minneapolis and Wisconsin. Hey!
Well, I want to kick it off with a general topic. We did a series of interviews in this issue on with women who are successful in what are traditionally male-dominated industries, lines of work. We interviewed Chief Harto of the Minneapolis Police Force. We interviewed you in the perhaps traditionally male-dominated chef profession. And we interviewed Penny Wheeler, who's the CEO of Allina Health. She's not only the first female CEO of that HMO, but she's the first physician CEO, which is kind of amazing. She's a remarkable person. It made me wish I had that health plan, actually. But what came out of those interviews was how different gender disparities are in different industries, and how that evolves over time, and how we might think of the tech industry as being more progressive, and yet at the same time Yeah. And you know, quite honestly, as a man, this is these topics are often an ongoing course of education for me, because I will say, well, wait, I thought that was a very progressive field, and then someone will go, what are you talking about? You don't know. Is anyone willing to talk about their line of work or something that they know about? I mean, you're shaking your head. Are you willing to jump in on that?
Sure. Can we just take these out?
Sorry, I'm just not going to bend over awkwardly anymore. I encourage you ladies to do the same.
Thank you. We'll jump in.
Take the bull by the horns. Okay, so male-dominated industries. I don't know what to say about this except that it's exhausting often to be a woman in a male-dominated industry, and I think even when you look at industries that are not male-dominated, it doesn't necessarily. There's this interesting kind of cachet that happens in male-dominated industries where they're seen as more desirable. Think of like doctor versus nurse, or think of a profession like a teacher. So I think there's sometimes this sort of ghettoization of female-dominated industries that's really unfortunate. I don't really remember what the question was about like a male-dominated industry, except each industry has its own. So every industry sort of has its own culture, and so when you come into that industry and you don't fit that culture, it's always it's a bit of a struggle. It's tiring, it's exhausting, depending on whether you're sort of striking a new trail or trying to fit into that culture. Either it's exhausting to you because you're trying to act like the other people are acting. So I read the article, and one of the things that really sort of rung true with me, I think it was the CEO of Alina, who said that she spent a lot of time doing things on her own, not asking for help, not reaching out because she didn't want to appear weak, and she was trying to fit in with the culture of the industry that she was in. And so I think there's something that happens when you're the first or one of the first in an industry trying to sort of shift things a little bit that is just exhausting and tiring because you're sort of swimming upstream almost all the time. So.
And how about the tech business? What would you say about the tech business, which seems so youth-oriented as well as male-oriented?
Yes, it is. What would I say about that? I don't know that I have any great insight on it, except that I have learned, I think one of the advantages of getting older is you just give less of a shit if you don't fit in. And so that's like one of the great blessings that I've learned as I've gotten older is I worry a lot less about like, do I look like what people think a technologist looks like? And there was a couple years ago, a presentation that I saw a woman do. She worked at Google, and she was doing one of those Ignite 5-minute talks in Australia, and it was all about computer engineer Barbie. And all of the sort of internet outrage about like, oh my God, why does there have to be like a computer engineer Barbie? And her point was, I'm a very feminine woman and I'm a coder. And what I like about computer engineer Barbie is we're telling girls, you don't have to look like your stereotype of a programmer. You can look the way that you want to look, and you can like the things you want to like. It doesn't have to be an either or. And so if anything, that's what I've been trying to teach myself, and what I'm trying to teach my daughter and my son is, you get to like science and princesses, that's okay. Whether you're a girl or a boy, you can like both of those things at the same time. You get to hold both of those things. And so I think the more that we can all do that, the more those cultures become more open to people looking different than what they think, a developer or somebody is supposed to look like.
Yeah. And anyone else on that? I'm looking down at you guys at the kitchen. We know how male-dominated the chef profession has been historically. Do you have any insights? Is that changing? Is that something different now? Is it? And how hard is it?
It's a tough business. I think it's strenuous. It is long hours. It's a lot of lifting. It's a lot of multitasking. I think we talked to deans of cooking schools across the nation. We just talked to the CIA recently. They have over half of their admissions are women, but the women tend to go into segments of the food industry rather than into beginning kitchens. So they're working smarter and not harder, and they're gaining employment in other avenues of food. I chose cooking because it was one of my first passions, coming from a farming and ranching family, growing up with a garden. I really loved food, and that was one of my primary interests. It was creative. I could learn and express myself through food, and it's something that I just kind of stuck with it. I had a lot of grit. I'm a farm girl. I'm not afraid of working hard. So I excelled in the industry, and it is still a male-dominated industry, although I think kitchens are becoming more sort of, what's the word?
They're a little bit more open, and I think that there are a lot more progressive kitchens these days that are willing to just open their kitchens to anyone, I think. So with that said, I think the industry is changing. I think there are more women. There always has been a lot of women in kitchens. However, they've just kind of been behind the scenes promoting male chefs, helping them rise to the top, I think. But now the spotlight, I think, is turning. On East or West Coast, we see more women being highlighted as chefs and leaders, running kitchens, owning their own businesses. I think part of that is with the national movement of the press and food writers highlighting women-owned businesses. We happen to be part of 2 national chef organizations, and so we're very much on the forefront of listening and tuning into that. We're bringing, in 2016, we're bringing the National Women's Chef and Restaurateur Educational One-Day Training Session here in Minneapolis in August, so we're super excited to be on the forefront of that, and that as it continues into the year. It's just going to be a fun training day highlighting how super cool our scene is here for women. There's a lot of women doing great things in food in Minneapolis and St. Paul. In the state for that matter, lots of farms, lots of women farming, raising livestock, growing produce. So there's a lot of cool things happening. So we're always talking about, how cool the North is. We call this the North. We're in the Midwest, but we're close to our sisters in Canada, so we call it the North. So things are changing, and I think as a whole, the gender bias, I think in the millennial mindset is just kind of evening out and not placing emphasis on one or the other. I think we're all working together for a common goal. That's what we're seeing in kitchens. That's what we promote as a brand, of everybody working together. And we have a lot of youngsters working with us, and I think that keeps our ear to the ground and tuning in. All our kids right now working with us, they're like 18, 19, 21, 22, 24. I think our oldest person, is she here tonight, Sarah? She's like in her early 30s. So it is changing, and we tune in and we ask them. I'm constantly asking my staff, like, what do you see? What do you want? What do you do? Do you have any suggestions? So as a older person, I think I'm always tuning into, the climate of what the great things young people bring to our workplace. And so nevertheless, my final answer is that I think things are changing. It's no longer simply a male-dominated industry. It's changing, but it has been for years. But I think it's different, changing. Or I want it to change, or I'm gonna make it change.
Well, Sue, would you be willing to talk about the topic of business leadership for women? And I mean, the thing that I'm hearing out of that, which I agree with so much, is that the millennial generation is looking at so many things differently than my generation, which is considerably older than them. And I mean, do you think that in business leadership, that change is accelerating generationally?
I think it's a good question. I don't know if it's accelerating. I don't know, from my perspective, being not of the millennial generation, I don't know if we've come that far. I think from my perspective, I work with entrepreneurs primarily, so we don't follow rules well. We're not employable. We don't really follow the system, whether we're male or female anyway. And so when there's a structure, we kind of refute it. It's a natural thing I think entrepreneurs come with, which is that's why I want to do my own thing. So I think for the women entrepreneurs that I see, if I put it in a gender lens, part of why women start businesses, from what I've seen in the 11 years I've been in peer learning situations, is they're looking at the game was made by men for men, and I don't think that makes it bad. I think that's the way business used to be, because when my dad was growing up, my dad's 96, you know, men went to work, women stayed home, and that's pretty much how it was. Women had 3 choices until 1970-ish. It's not that long ago, you know. I was born shortly after that. So I started thinking about, you know, my mom was in that generation where it was, you're gonna be a mom, you're gonna be a nurse, you're gonna be a teacher, or you're gonna, that's it. There isn't a whole lot else, or you're a complete rule breaker. And that's not that long ago. And so on the continuum, I think we've come a long way, but I think women entrepreneurs look up and go, I want to design a game I can win at. And that doesn't mean men have to be bad, or that the gender issue has to be they're wrong, we're right. It's just I don't know how to navigate that intuitively, because I think there are other ways you can run businesses. And what I see women doing running businesses is thinking about it from a nurturing standpoint. And I hate to go back to traditional things, but I really do believe women deal with emotion and care in terms of the workplace differently than men have trained themselves, and I say trained, to play that game. And I think they cohabitate well, but I think they're different games. So for entrepreneurs, I look up and I go, whether it's a millennial thing or not, we're still on the early side, I think, of the continuum of what it means for women in business, but I think they can coincide. I don't know that we play by the same rules.
Kind of follow up on that a little bit. So the study that I've been doing for the last 8 years looks at the 100 largest publicly traded companies that have their headquarters in Minnesota. So the first year of doing that, I had a whole lot of fun asking people, how many of those companies do you think have women CEOs? Because they all did the same thing. They tried to guess the lowest. No, you're ruining my joke. Oh. But most people would try to, because you know too much, most people would try to guess a really low number and would be way too high. Right? So at that first year it was 4, it's actually 6 right now. Awesome. 6, yeah. But we did have a high of 7, so we actually, a high of 7, stepped down from that. But what I also, one of the big things that I discovered that first year was how many cases where there's just one woman on the board. That was the most frequent. And we looked at a lot of the research around what happens when you have more women on boards. And you actually see better financial gains happening in those cases. And actually it's just more diversity in general. So you get more better risk taking rather than just risk taking for risk taking. Women tend to ask more questions, want to know more information. And getting to that, you know, that first one is one step. But what we also found in the literature is that you have to get to really 3 women before you really start to see a difference. So that's been sort of a continual angst, I think, and we've been doing this research, is how few companies get past that barrier of just 1 woman. We also get very annoyed by the ones that have none at all, right? So the first year that we did that study, my daughter was in kindergarten, and I was showing her the work that we had done, and she got to the part where she could see what we were calling the 0-0 companies, no women on their boards, no women executive officers. And she said something to me at the time that I've just never forgotten. She said, well, Mommy, those companies don't know the I care values, you know, which is what she'd been taught in school. So I do think generational change is coming, but it's a long way. I mean, you get to those top levels, we're not even close, not even close.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about in talking to you tonight. I mean, you see those trends improving, but it's so gradual, it's so incremental.
We get really excited when it's a 0.5 percentage point difference.
Yeah.
You know, we cheer around the office.
And what is the percentage of board level?
So if you look at all 100 of the boards, it's been around 15%.
Around 15, which is good nationally, is that true?
And that's sad as well.
Yeah.
So I was once quoted as saying that being the best of the worst is nothing to be proud of.
Yeah, that's what we came to. We did some research, and we said, wow, we're like at the top, but then
But it's pathetic.
what are we doing? We can't stand on the rooftops
Yeah.
and say that we're succeeding.
Right.
This was all over social media this week. I'm sure a lot of you saw it. A study of performance reviews at corporations. Women are found to be 2 times as likely to receive feedback about having a, quote, aggressive communication style than men. And women are more than twice as likely to be praised for their accomplishments in terms of team effort rather than individual effort. They are much less likely to be praised for technological skill. I mean, how stereotypical can you get? But this study is incredibly informative in terms of, would you say, maybe an ingrained double standard that probably well-meaning people aren't necessarily aware of. But how do you counter that over time? Is there a strategy other than just sheer awareness?
Well, actually, I think awareness is probably the number one most important piece of it, and the reason why we continue to do the study year after year, even though we don't see significant changes in the numbers. I think we always want it to be top of people's minds, that if you're not actively working to make whatever group we're talking about more diverse, it's not going to be more diverse. So putting it out there and making people hear it and talk about it all the time, I think is just one of many steps to actually getting some change. But people have to always keep that in mind. It's not anywhere close to being a diverse workforce at those top levels.
So what I would say is when a man champions what you just heard, it's heard very differently than when a woman goes, hey, I was on that team, I did that effort. That just further perpetuates, like if I stood up for myself and I'm in a group and they said, Sue, you did a great job on the team, and I go, wait, that was my idea, not Bob's, I look like an ass. And I get criticized for that because it's like, oh, she's whining, she's just doing that same thing. But if one man has the courage to go, wait a second, it really was her idea, and I think this is a travesty, or wait a second, we just did it again, it changes everything. And I will tell you, when I was at the international conference for the Women Presidents Organization, Simon Sinek spoke. So if any of you have ever heard him, fabulous. He's intense, he's awesome. His entire speech was amazing. We're riveted. He's talking about the feminine way of leading, not female, but feminine, meaning guys can do this, women can do this. And it's completely anything, I promise you, I don't care who the woman is in this room, we'd go, oh yeah, those are great points. And we're all just drinking it in on top of it. He's cute and he's funny and he's dynamic. So we're going, this is great. Speech is over. And we ask the question, because I'm going, how would we have received that very same message if a woman did it? And we're all women in the room for the most part. And everyone said, oh, we would have gone like, yeah, right, that's good. But it's because a guy said it. It was like, oh my God, he gets us. He's one of us. He could make a dent in this. Because the men have to, I believe, be our partners in saying, hey, we aren't fighting, we're collaborating to make a change in how we have set this up. And that's, I think that would be another piece of what would make a difference.
So I want to echo what you said, that, for any men that are in the audience, like that is a really powerful way to champion your coworkers and your colleagues who might be getting passed over in terms of recognition. But I also would say, like, women can do that for each other. So in general, women are perceived poorly if we step up and say, I did that. But if I know it was Joann's idea and I say, oh no, you guys, that was actually her idea, that's another way of sort of building each other up. So it helps if men do it. It also helps if we do it for each other. The thing about the performance reviews, I think there's a couple things going on here. One, most of this I don't think is conscious or malicious. And the nature of unconscious bias is that you don't know it's there. And so one of the things that we've been trying to work on a lot at Clockwork is educating the whole staff about what unconscious bias is.
And there's some resources we found online where people can take online tests that help them understand what sort of gender bias do you have unconsciously and what sort of race bias do you have that's unconscious. And as you said, the very act of alerting yourself to that fact can help you look at things differently. But most people, if you asked them, unless they're like anonymous internet commenters, wouldn't admit to you that they're total raging sexists. But they may have bias in how they're giving feedback to the men that report to them versus the women that report to them. So that's one side of it for me. The other side of it is not just that we should be allowed to be as direct and as aggressive as our male colleagues. I think it's also maybe the flip side of it is that sometimes they need to get the feedback that they need to be less aggressive. So I think sometimes there's this idea that we have to get as aggressive and that needs to be okay. And I think certainly like we need to even out like what is perceived as aggressive from a woman is much lower than what is perceived as aggressive from a man, and that needs to change. But in addition, maybe some of the feedback that our male colleagues need to get is around how to collaborate differently, how to present differently, how to give feedback differently. So there's change to be made on both sides.
Which sounds like a process of mutual enlightenment, which sounds great, you know. Something I came across again in social media, it's something that I've discussed more than once with professional women friends of mine, and I want to open this up to the audience after this. But Jennifer Lawrence, the actress, on Facebook, writing about how she's paid far less from her male cohorts, but she didn't go in and say, no, I need 50% more than that, or I won't do the job, you know. And I've discussed that with colleagues who are old and at my level, and we've kind of discussed the differences in our salary negotiating styles, and there's a different culture there too. And when Jennifer Lawrence wrote about it, it really stood out to me because she said, well, if I say that, they're going to say I'm spoiled and I'm all of these gendered things, you know, whereas if a man does it, he's being assertive and he's, you know, making the best of the situation. That it rang true with me because I've talked about it before. Does that ring true for in any of your professions? Or
My punchy answer is start your own business.
I think that, like, yes, women need to ask more for raises and all of that. Certainly as a person who manages people and who hires people, I see a big difference in what men ask for versus what women ask for, whether it's in the job offer process or during a review. But in addition to that, I really think women need to talk more to each other about what we make, right? Like the way to change this gap is for us to talk about what we make. And so I think the more that we can sort of lift that cultural taboo we have around talking about that, the more chance we have to change that sort of as a group. I have a friend who was talking to another friend and said, like, what are you making? He said, in my culture, we all talk about what we make because that's how we help each other ask for more. That's how we all know that things are staying even. And so I think the more that we can have those types of conversations, the easier it gets to ask. And I also think, generally speaking, going back to the thing about how women are perceived in how we ask, I think often men will ask for what they want without feeling the need to provide a lot of evidence for why they should get that amount. Whereas women will come in with a ton of evidence, like, this is why I should make what I make. I don't think the evidence-based approach is bad. I think it is a lot harder to say no if you come in with a lot of evidence. But I would just say, my just blanket advice is always ask. The absolute worst answer you will ever get is no. And too often, the women I know, myself included during my career, we haven't wanted to seem like, oh, I don't want to be greedy. I really want this job. I want them to give it to me. But ask for more than you think you're worth, because ideally they'll counteroffer and you'll get what you actually wanted. But never start with what you actually want. Always ask for more. Like, ask for the number that makes you get kind of sweaty. That's how you know you've asked for the right number. And like, best case, you're gonna get it. Worst case, you'll get something less. But always ask. It doesn't hurt to ask. But I do think as women, sadly, the way that we ask, that can be very loaded, how that is perceived and how we ask.
Joann, is there any data in that?
Well, actually, just to kind of piggyback on what you said, not only do women not negotiate in the same way, but we also don't apply for jobs unless we fit all of the qualifications in general, whereas men will, if they fit one or two, they'll go ahead and apply. I think it is part of the nature of what we do. My own personal crusade on that, I do a fair amount of hiring in the position that I'm in, and I do not negotiate on salary. I figure out the maximum I can pay people, and I tell them that's what I can pay them, and there's no negotiation. I also then, for people who hadn't been hired before me, I try to work on helping to find money to close the gap if there's a significant gap between them. That's harder. But I think that would be a better approach to me in general. Let's just figure out what we can pay you and pay you that.
We have some more time, and we have such a good crowd tonight. I wanted to see if anyone has any questions or comment for any of us. Hi. You trip over everything.
Okay. My question is for the leaders who either manage people. Do you see a difference in the leadership in terms of training? So managers, I think some of that change can be made, top down versus down up. So do you see any differences in terms of what they are teaching their leaders or any type of development discussing those type of issues? The women inequality.
The gender, the gap,
Yeah.
like especially the salary gap and just opportunity gap, does that come up in conversation amongst your peers if you're a leader?
Oh, okay.
And not just women.
So does the conversation around salary gap come up in leadership discussions if you're a leader in a
yes.
company?
To apply that to help out the people that you're leading.
Got it. Okay, so I can speak for our company, which is relatively small. It's 70 people, and there's 2 women. CEO and COO are both women. So I think for us, the answer is yes. I don't know how true that is at other organizations, but I think both Nancy and I have sort of a personal stake in wanting to create a technology company that is different and wanting to create a company in general that has a little bit of a different culture. So yes, we do try to look at that and educate the managers within the organization around and we're actually trying to do what you're talking about, which is make public internally, these are the pay scales for each position, and they just are what they are, and this is how you move from one to the next. Which then removes some of that, the bias around who's going to ask, how will they ask, when will they ask, and all those questions. And hopefully smaller companies making those changes will help influence the bigger companies to make those changes too.
What I would say from the perspective of the women in the rooms I'm in, they already are aware of it because many of them left corporate jobs. Not all. Some were born entrepreneurial. They're all direct, straightforward, aware. They're reading the same things. They're fighters. They're feminists in the best sense of that word. I don't mean women who hate men. I mean women who say, we want to equal things out. So I think it's a topic that comes up often. But again, this is a pretty tough crowd, tough-minded, bossy, ballsy women. And so when they have the opportunity, I think I can say all of the ones I'm aware of in the rooms I've sat in, it's very much something they're trying to balance out within their sphere of influence, but we do talk about it a lot. In fact, in the last recession in 2008, when everything went terribly, what I heard most often in the room is, how do I keep things as much the same? How do I keep people employed? How do I keep benefits? They weren't going straight to a CFO saying, what on the line item can we cut so we can stay in business? We want to employ the maximum number of people with the least impact to the business. We don't want to change things. How do we do that knowing that our revenue is going down? And one company in particular, and this is an outlier, but I thought it was a profound example of what happens, is she said, I'm going to bonus my employees now. And they had just been bonused at year end. She bonused them at the beginning of the year because she said, our revenues are going down. I'm not sure we can do this at the end of the year. And my intent, and she did a much more eloquent job of this, but said, my intent is that you'll stick with us through the hard times, and we will do everything in our power to maintain what's going on. But I want you to know I can't guarantee you what the end of the year looks like, so we're gonna do it while the coffers are full. And I went, oh my God. You know, it was such a courageous thing to do at a time when everyone was slicing and dicing and cutting and getting tight. And I went, that's the kind of stuff that I think is along these lines where it's challenging. What does that mean? How do you really do it when the rubber hits the road? It's tough. It's scary. That's a lot of people's livelihoods. So I think it does happen. I think it's, again, incremental compared to what we hope would happen.
Anyone else? Hi.
Thanks so much for all you shared today. I think it was awesome that we talked about how men can be involved in the equality process, because I think so many of these conversations exclude them, and I think one of the biggest parts, as you said, of really making a step forward. What would you say, any of you, each of you, to a millennial male who you think could be part of this process? Because I've talked to so many of my peers, and many of them still think that, or rather, they think we've made so much progress that they don't recognize the 70 cents to $1 gap. They don't think that exists anymore. So how can we help them be along on the journey and recognize how much we still have to go?
Well, I'll just kick it off by saying that, you know, the millennials get criticized a lot for not acknowledging limitations, or for saying, you know, I want to start out doing these amazing things. And okay, fine. I mean, you know, every generation complains about the next one. But, you know, I was thinking of, names. Who wrote Eat, Pray, Love? Was that Elizabeth Gilbert? I went to see her talk. And she said, you know what I love about men? You know, they will just say, like, the Mideast peace process, yeah, I'll take a crack at that. I think I could fix that, sure. Yeah, give me a chance. I could figure something out, you know. And she was like, that's great. I mean, you know, that's something to be encouraged. You know, I have a 17-year-old daughter, you know, and I feel like I want to see more of that. I mean, what's wrong with a little hubris, really? I mean, you know, what do you have to lose, you know? And if that is traditionally a male value, and it's a generational value more across genders in millennials, I think it's great, personally.
Well, I think with our industry and our atmosphere with our food trucks and the kitchen, I think it can be perceived as very masculine. And what we've done personally is really kind of embrace some of the young women and really treated them just equal across the board, and really you know, got them behind the wheel of the trucks. You know, it's a 28-foot truck. You're driving down the highway. It's actually kind of scary for anyone. And just kind of treating all of our staff the same, and I think that's been really helpful with just the younger generation. And I mean, we've had definitely some women that are a little bit older, but I think that we've really just kind of acted like this is just normal, you know, like all these, you know, the knives and the fire, and, you know, you're in the kitchen. I mean, it's a pretty tough game, you know, and you've got to be pretty rugged. So I think that we've really encouraged the women on the same level that we have expectations of the men as well. So that's just what we've done personally.
Yeah. Joann, are there any is there like an academic perspective on that?
Actually, what comes to mind is to normalize work-life balance. So all of the things, you know, if men are more proactive about taking paternity leave, it's not a negative when women take maternity leave. If you're not insisting on being there 80 hours a week, then that's not the goal that people have to reach for. So I think doing all those things, and a lot of things that have already been mentioned, just the fact that you're taking the time to recognize the abilities of the people around you. So I think we always try to think about anything that you're doing that is helping women to advance is actually helping everyone to advance. Well, I can give you one fact about women on boards. There are a few countries that have adopted quotas. So you have to have a certain percentage of your board be filled by women. I don't think that flies very well in our country. I mean, we tend to like to think that people get where they've gotten because of merit-based reasons, right? So it is a way to think about it. So one of my colleagues at St. Catherine has always said, well, there's nothing wrong with quotas because at least then you have a seat at the table. When you have a seat at the table, then you can start making changes. So there are just, I think, very different approaches about how you would make that change. And I guess part of it is culture-based. What is it, changes that we're willing to try?
Oh, and it's one of the things that struck us when we worked on this story was seeing really a lot of change generationally, but we only live for 75 or 80 years. I mean, you want to see it happen faster. You want to see it happen in your time. And history is not always a curve of getting better, too, so you kind of, you know. But back to optimism. Are the numbers, how do the numbers in the U.S. compare to the big European countries, to Germany and France?
Off the top of my head, I really don't know. I haven't really been more national in the way we've looked at our comparisons.
Yeah.
But I am aware of the handful of countries that have done quotas, and then have it's just insisted on having a higher percentage. So they've done it by.
How long have they tried that?
How long have they tried that? Oh, I do not know.
Yeah.
I do not know.
Yeah. Another question? Hi.
This is maybe less a question and more just kind of a perspective from a young woman in her 30s. As I'm hearing everyone talk, I hear a little bit of apprehension of kind of like speaking too boldly, even from these women who are leaders and in positions that, from my vantage point, I look at you as role models and in positions of power. And so I kind of just put out there that me as a woman in my 30s, I'm kind of looking for an unapologetic female leader who also, I'm sorry I'm forgetting your name, St. Kate's. Joann. So Joann said, you know, when we help women with maternity leave and have men take paternity leave and think of it as family leave, we help everyone. And so I guess I kind of come up here to say, like, we don't need to be apologetic and say, ooh, there's not to be a bad feminist and say, like, man-hating. Like, that's not what feminism is. Feminism is what you said, which is equality. And so I guess I kind of am curious about this negotiation and encouraging us to, as women leaders, and looking for women role models to not apologize and to more claim this language and feminism and start telling the story of what that really means. It means better lives for communities and all families. It doesn't mean man-hating. And, like, we need our women leaders. We need you to speak loudly and not worry and not kind of make room for mansplaining and that sort of thing. Like, we need you just to say that. So I just want to speak as somebody who's, like, looking up and wanting to hear that, and also not wanting to be labeled as just like a rebel rouser, somebody like yelling in the boardroom or whatever, because it kind of just like hit me in the gut a little to think feminism, ooh, I don't mean like man-hating. It's like, no, like, let's tell the story of what that means and, like, use specifics and speak loudly and deal with it if people say that's being aggressive, because we know it's not. Yes.
Well said. I can appreciate that, and I personally feel like we are 100 years behind schedule, and I hope that that's not the truth. But I really believe that, you know, you can be the change that you really want to see. You know, Carrie and I, we're really motivated by pushing forward with our industry, shining light on female chefs, and it has not been the case. Everybody's asking, you know, where are the female chefs? Like we're some, you know, hidden bird or something. I don't know, but it's really been our goal in the last few months, and we're really putting ourselves out there a lot more. And I think that that's a big thing too. Is you do have to have the courage, and I appreciate what you have to say, because I'm not really a great public speaker, but I'm forcing myself to come forward and to make myself tell my story and to really say, you know what, we have a long way to go, and we really have to push forward. We have to talk to each other, we have to support each other, and not really, we have to look out for fellow women as well, and we have to check ourselves. Like, we have to actually say, like, where do we stand in this? Because sometimes, you know, when you're alone with yourself, you have to just kind of say, you know, am I sexist? That, like, how do I look at this? You know, am I paying the women the same as I am the men? Or how am I viewing this? You know, really ask yourself and try to change a little bit, try to open your mind, try to stretch a little bit, and be really, really aware of where your own stance is. So I appreciate what you have to say.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad you said that. I'm an unapologetic feminist. I hope that what you have heard tonight is not to speak any quieter or to just sort of like go with the flow. What I do think is important is understanding the facts of like what this article talks about, just understanding how unconscious bias works, understanding what's going on in our culture, because there are moments when you get to like burn it down and change the game, and then there are other moments where you're like, I gotta play this game to get where I wanna get, and then I can change the game. And so I think it's just really important to understand how people are perceiving you, whether you believe it or not, whether you think it's right or not. That is what I hope you hear from this, is not that like that is how you should behave, but just how sometimes we are perceived, and it's not fair or right, and I hope we change it, but it's not changing fast enough. Now that I'm in a position of leadership, I hope I can help change it for you and for my daughter and for everyone else, and I hope you do the same once you reach whatever heights you will reach. So it is not about being quiet or playing by the rules, but understand what's happening.
We have time for another. Hi. Hello.
Stand over here. So I deal with equality and feminism every day in my job, and it's great. But the question I run into, also being a younger woman who is not in a position of power, I find a lot of women struggle with a lot of the facts I think that you're saying, is there's not a lot of women in power. There's not a lot of seats at the table for the women. So I find that women in their 20s and 30s who are trying to climb to the top, that's when they get competitive with each other. And you know, earlier you kind of talked on it, is speak up for the other woman. Say she has credit for it. How do you speak to women my age and encourage them to say you do need to lift each other up, you can still get where you need to be as an individual at the table, but you can still bring us all with you? Because I think that's the biggest problem, is there's only so many seats at the table because we're fighting each other for them. And you know, again, this is something I talk about daily, so I need to reach these people on another level, as someone who's gotten there. And how do we all lift each other up and find this seat together?
For me, I think one of the problems with fighting other women to get to where you want to get is that the level of pressure that exists when you are the only one is really excruciating. So like this happens a lot in the tech space, where if you are the only female coder, for example, you have to be like 8 times better than the worst guy that you're working with, because you have this pressure of like, I am representing all women. If I make a single mistake, everybody's like, this is why girls can't code. So for me, one of the advantages and selling points of working with each other to get, to sort of climb the ladder of whatever organization or industry you're trying to climb, is that once you're there together, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 other people to share that sort of, I don't want to say burden, because it sounds so negative, but you have somebody else to share that with, so the pressure and the spotlight isn't solely on you. And I think, I don't know how to change people's minds about the fact that there's, about the scarcity fear. Like, I think people feel like if I don't get this, someone else will, and so I have to fight other people for it. I think some of that is just a work culture thing. But I think the more that you can convince people, especially if they're moving through an industry or moving up a ladder and they're going to be the minority once they get there, whether that's gender or race, is the more of us there are, then the more we're seen as individuals instead of as a representative of every one of my gender, every one of my race. So hopefully that could be some kind of selling point for people.
Something you said struck me when you said, I'm not a woman, in a position of power, and I get the title piece of that. But I go, I think that's the misnomer of the whole thing. Is I think every single woman has power. I think every single man has power. And so coming from, this is a powerful thing, every person I touch, every person I impact, and my job is to be the best me. And if we, and I say this having been one of those super competitive 20-something young women. I got into Target right out of college, and I knew I would die a slow death if I stayed there. I am not cut out for acquiescing and following rules. I'm just not. And so as I found out how the game was played and what it took to win it, I think in my mind at 24 years of age, I thought I could win this game, it would be losing. And I think whenever you're in a position like that, you're in the wrong game. And so it's more about when I'm at my best, I want my pals with me, whether that's you or you. And so I'm championing them. And I think in your 20s, I'm globalizing here, but I go, I don't care if it's career or anything else, women are freaking competitive. Are you the prettiest? Are you the thinnest? Watch TV for 4 minutes, read social media. Everything is about what it should be like. And if you buy in, you're competing. So it's how do you maintain you? And as Meghan said earlier, the older I've gotten being a 50-year-old woman, I really don't care. I really don't. And it's the coolest thing to mature into that for real versus convincing myself of that. Because there are times when I go, I really don't care, but I really do. But I really don't care, you know, and it's more of that, so I'm gonna take her out, you know, if she's gonna win, I'm gonna win. How many, if we tell the truth, don't go, yeah, I've done that. So it's, how do you break that? You do it once. And then you go, that worked. And oh my God, I might have to break my own behavior because as a competitive human being at 50 years of age, I will tell you, I am in another arena. I do EOS implementation, and Meghan will laugh at me because she knows this. It's a very consultative environment. The men in that room, and it's mainly men, there's 112 of us, there are 104 men, there are 8 women, or there's maybe 102 men and 10 women, but that's about it. And I broke a record recently. I wasn't trying to. Probably for one of the few times in my life, I wasn't trying to. I was doing my game, and I was doing it well. And I'm still in that paradigm going, oh, there's another way this can be done. And actually it worked by accident and on purpose. Instead of, I went out and intended. But we've got to break ourselves first and go, how do I be the first one to lift? How do I lift when the next woman goes, thank you very much, you're gonna lose? Because it's gonna happen. And at the same time go, how do I do that again? Because the more people I go, I find my tribe. I find those women who are gonna go, we're opening the door for women chefs because we saw an injustice in the news and we responded. And we responded favorably, and in fact, we're gonna show it. And in doing so, we're better. But it wasn't like a cause you sought out. You know, it's something that happened because you went there because it was the right place to go. So I think it's, we have to be internally looking. So the fact that you asked the question, I go, you're doing it. Keep it up, turn up the volume, keep going. And be at things like this so we can keep encouraging each other so that I remind myself when I go, no, I'm not, yes, I am. Help somebody, lead first, be the one who gives. It's a vulnerable position to go, what if she really takes over that position I want, but I do want to do the right thing? She might do it anyway.
Well, thank you. And that's a good message to go out on. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much for coming out. We will, we're going to have another Conversations on Tap in a few months. Keep an eye out on minnesotamonthly.com. It's going to be on a medical topic that affects everybody in this room, kind of a paradigm changer. So we're just starting to work on that story right now, and it's really, really exciting. So we hope to see everybody back for the next one. And thank you so much to our panelists who were just amazing. Please. Yeah. And good night, everyone. Thank you.